I would like to announce our pastor, Raymond Curtis.
Good afternoon. Don't think I put one in there, so I better tell you the title right away. It's called Grace and Obedience. And considering the time of the year, I thought that that was a good time to get some clarity on that, because the world doesn't seem to be able to do so. I hope we all had a great Thanksgiving. I know we did, all that were with us. We ate way too much. We had way too much fun, but that's a good thing. It wasn't that kind of fun that the world usually thinks of when they think of having had way too much fun. We could have had more. This has always been a favorite holiday of mine because it encapsulates this word, that we're here to thank God for the things that he does for us, whether we recognize them or not. We do this, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. You've got some even in the church now that want to say that Thanksgiving, because it's not a biblical holiday, that we shouldn't do it because there's a worldly element to it. And I'm thinking, well, if it's your worldly element, fine, but that's not how we see it. Matter of fact, in all honesty, I think that that's more in line with the way the world sees things generally, because the world amazingly seems to be unwilling to accept this holiday. It doesn't like it very much. You notice that as soon as we get done with our dinner, we're already getting emails about Black Friday. We're already being told, leave your family and go spend your money and buy more stuff. They've slapped Black Friday right in there to get us right back out the house to spend more money that we don't have on stuff that we don't need so that they can further enrich themselves. And they tell us that, oh, you're making yourself better because you got more stuff. But that's the old theory that the guy that dies with the most stuff wins. Of course, we know that's not true. They offer us a new lure as the new name for slaves. They offer us consumers. You've heard that. Oh, wow, you consumers. Just whenever you hear consumer, think slave. And they think you'll be closer to what they really intend for you. They offer you, however, a new lure with this Black Friday for you slaves who weren't drawn into the Xmas maelstrom, which since its inception has solidly counted for 20 to 24% of the New Year's total sales. Think about that. You spend more between October 1st and January, now the 15th, because now they drag it all the way up to inventory because they want to get all that stuff out of there before the next year begins. You count in 1 3-month and 15-day period for roughly 25%. That's 1 in 4 of the dollars spent for the whole year. Xmas is typically the largest economic stimulus for many nations around the world, as sales increased dramatically in almost all areas of retail. The U.S. retail industry generated this year out of that 25%, over $3 trillion. That was for 2013. They're on point for $4 trillion for 2014, if things go well. That's why they're pushing it so hard. I think that's why they pushed so hard to move Thanksgiving out of the way this time. Because did you notice that it just seemed to be a little bit harder pushed this time? I noticed it. I noticed it. But you see, these sales, they only hit 19.2, so there was nearly a 6% drop from the yearly take, which might, as I said, explain the more vicious bums rush they put on Thanksgiving this year. Or maybe it just seemed that way to me. I don't know. Maybe it was just me. But this stat may be why, but it speaks to a far vaster problem. A problem that is not modern by any means, because it is a human problem, which means it's at least, from a historical standpoint, nearly 6,000 years old. It's a problem that goes all the way back to the garden. So this would probably be a good place to drop anchor and see what that problem is. You see, in the garden, the first couple chose to go after the false freedom offered by Satan rather than the perfect power promised by Yahweh. Choosing to be as gods rather than to wait for God's time when, as all will that make it, become gods. Genesis, dropping anchor, the 3rd chapter, the 1st verse. Genesis, the 3rd chapter, the 1st verse, where it says, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, has Yahweh," that word is H3068. We get confused sometimes because they get confused in what word to substitute. Not quite sure who we're talking about. I'm going to try to clear that up too. "Yea, has Yahweh said, You should not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, Oh, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim," H430. Slight difference. So this wasn't a one-man deal. The whole of the Godhead gave them the order and said, well, actually, the order was given actually to Adam, and he was told to pass it down. So obviously he did pass it down correctly. However, there was a problem with obeying the instruction. At this point, it wasn't even a question of obedience or disobedience. It was the question of the attitude toward the instruction. Notice here. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, You should not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. Wait a minute. Where did he say that? Where did that touching thing come in? And now you see where the problem lies. Verse 4. "And the serpent said unto the woman, You shall not surely die. For Elohim doth know that in the day that you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and you shall be as God." And see, that's the theory, that idea that because you know as much as the boss, I can be the boss. I can sit in the background and throw nettles and keep up stuff, and maybe one day the people will get tired enough of that boss and decide we need a new boss. Just a theory, just how things go in America today. Thus, in ignorance, they chose to be as gods rather than to wait for the gifts that the Godhead would offer us all in proper time and in proper order. eternal life, and rulership with him. But they were impatient. We know about impatient, right? We don't know anybody in here that's impatient, right? Just wanted to check. Impatience and rebellion began in the garden. Afterward, Yahweh chose a people for himself and freed them from the slavery of Egypt. And again, they rejected Yahweh's ruling over them. Let's go to Jeremiah, the 11th chapter, the 4th verse. This is no new problem. This has been going on for a while. It just seems to get worse the closer we get to the end. Jeremiah, the 4th chapter, the 11th verse, where it says, "And I commanded your fathers when I brought them out of the land of Egypt from the iron furnace, saying, listen to my voice and do all that I command you. So shall you be my people, and I will be your God. That I may confirm the oath that I swore to your fathers to give them a land flowing with milk and honey. And as at this day, then I also answered, so be it. They answered, so be it, Lord," or Yahweh. And Yahweh said to me, "Proclaim all these words in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. Hear the words of this covenant and do them. For I solemnly warned your fathers when I brought them up out of the land of Egypt, warning them persistently even to this day, saying, obey my voice. Yet they did not obey or incline the ear." They didn't even turn the ear and let me see what he's talking about at least. Let's at least try to pretend that we're listening. Didn't even incline the ear, but everyone walked in the stubbornness of his evil heart. Therefore I brought upon them all the words of this covenant which I commanded them to do, but they did not. Again, Yahweh said to me, a conspiracy exists among the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, as it does to this day, but we won't go there today. They have turned back to the iniquities of their forefathers, who refused to hear my words. They have gone after other gods to serve them. The house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken my covenant that I made with their fathers. Therefore, thus says Elohim, behold, I am bringing disaster upon them that they cannot escape. In case you're wondering what will happen, he's telling you up front. Though they cry to me, don't miss this, I will not listen to them. Then the cities of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem will go and cry to the gods to whom they make offerings, which are not me. But they cannot save them in the time of their trouble. Verse 13, for your gods, small g, have become as many as your cities, O Judah, and as many as the streets of Jerusalem are the altars you have set up to shame, altars to make offerings to Baal. Therefore, do not pray for this people. What? Don't even waste your time praying for this people. Do not pray for this people or lift up a cry or a prayer on their behalf, for I will not listen when they call to me in the time of their trouble. Whoa. Let that sink in for a second. Thus, the Israelites, I think they got to a point where they decided, if you go to 1 Samuel 8, we're not going to go there today because we know about that. We've talked about that for years, how they suddenly decided we don't like God ruling over us. We want a king. So they chose a man. And they didn't even know it. That's just how easy it is to rig an election, apparently. God secretly chose their first king for them. That first king being Saul. The people chose Saul, not for his obedience and loyalty to Yahweh, but for his, see if this sounds familiar to you, his dark good looks and his height. Not trying to be funny, just saying what I'm saying. For his good looks and his height. Yet at his first test, he failed Yahweh's test. An old promise made by God to his own people, he told them to destroy the Amalekites for backstabbing them when they were coming out of Egypt. Deuteronomy, the 25th chapter, the 17th verse. Let's go to Deuteronomy, the 25th chapter, the 17th verse, and see why he said this. And this is in quotes, so this came directly from Yahweh. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you came out of Egypt. How he attacked you on the way when you were faint and weary, and cut off your tail, those who were lagging behind you and he did not fear God. Laggers behind, in most cases, when they were brought out in a caravan, were usually the women and the children and the infirm. So they came up behind and attacked the women, the children, the young, and the infirm. The most cowardly act in history. Verse 19, therefore, when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your enemies around you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance to possess, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek. From under heaven, you shall not forget. So what's Saul's great idea after he does it? Let's go to 1 Samuel, the 15th chapter, the 2nd verse. 1 Samuel, the 15th verse, 15th chapter, the 2nd verse, my mistake. 1 Samuel, the 15th chapter, the 2nd verse, where it says, so says Yahweh of hosts, I will visit Amalek with what he did to Israel, how he set attack and attacked them in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and completely destroy all that they have. All that they have. And do not spare them. Spare nothing. But kill both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. And Saul gathered the people together and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 footmen and 10,000 men of Judah. And Saul came to a city of Amalek that lay wait in the valley. And Saul said to the Kenites, go, depart, get down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them. Well, he was threatening to do things, but let's follow this through and see what he did and see if we can figure out what he did wrong. For you showed kindness to all the sons of Israel when they came up out of Egypt. So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites, and Saul struck the Amalekites from Havilah as you came to Shur, which is over across Egypt, and he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive. He did what? The problems start here. He took the king of the Amalekites alive. What was he told to do? Hello. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep and of the oxen and of the fatlings and the lambs and all that was good, and would not completely destroy them, but everything that was vile and feeble they completely destroyed. In other words, what they didn't want, they killed off. And the word of Yahweh came to Samuel, saying, It repents me that I have set up Saul to be king, for he has turned back from following me on my first command and has not done my commands. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried out to Yahweh all night. And when Samuel rose up early the next morning to meet Saul, it was told to Samuel, saying, Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he has set up a place for himself and has gone around and passed on and gone down to Gilgal. And Samuel came to Saul and said to him, you are blessed of Yahweh. I have done the command of Yahweh, he said. Oh. And Samuel said, what then is this bleating of the flock in my ears? And what is the sound of the herd which I hear? And Saul said, they have brought them from the Amalekites. For, notice that same thing that Adam did. The woman you brought me. For the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen and to sacrifice to Yahweh, your God. Notice the difference there. In your mind, when you're against God, you can't even mentally wrap your mind around the concept that you're obedient to an almighty and powerful God. So you don't even accept it as your own. He didn't say Yahweh, our God. He said Yahweh, your God. Don't miss that. And it happened more than once. Please note that here in this strange but somehow familiar wording of Saul to Yahweh, your God. As if he had never been chosen by Yahweh, but somehow became a power unto himself, one who could disobey when it suited him. 15, and Saul said, they have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen to sacrifice to Yahweh, your God. And the rest we have completely destroyed. In other words, I know you said everything, but we saved the good stuff for you. And we killed the rest. And Samuel said to Saul, stop! And I will tell you what Yahweh has said to me tonight. And he said to him, speak, as if he was so sure it was going to be something good for him, that was going to make his toes tingle. No. And Samuel said, when you were little in your own sight. You went right to the problem. I like that. I like this guy already. And Samuel said, when you were little in your own sight, did you not become the head of the tribes of Israel? And Yahweh anointed you king over Israel. And Yahweh sent you on the way and said, go and completely destroy the sinners, Amalek, and fight against them until you destroy them. Why then did you not obey the voice of Yahweh? Why did you fly on the spoil and do evil in the sight of Yahweh? And Saul said to Samuel, yes, I have obeyed the voice of Yahweh and have gone the way which Yahweh sent me and have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and have completely destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took from the spoil of the flocks and herds the best of the things devoted to sacrifice to Yahweh, your God, in case we thought that was a mistake. Your God in Gilgal. And Samuel said, let's not miss this for those who want to get too physical with a spiritual concept. Does Yahweh delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices? As in obeying the word of Yahweh. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. To listen is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idol worship, because one usually leads to the other. Because you have rejected the word of Yahweh, he also has rejected you from being king. And Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned. Oh, now you figure it out. I have sinned, for I have disobeyed the command of Yahweh. You knew that when you did it. In your word, now let's hear why. This should be good. This should be good. Because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. Wow. I walk into a room. God says, you better do something. Little David back there said, you better do something. And I'm going to listen to little David? I don't think so. Here is a political rather than a godly decision. Listening to the people rather than the clear word of Yahweh, which was plain. Looking to solidify his standing with the people as if they could keep you in the position if God says no. Don't you know he could wipe them out with a breath? What are you doing here? But Saul chose to do what the people wanted rather than obey God. It's so clear that throughout the Old Testament, save for 2 or 3, the kings of Israel always seem to find their way into idolatry and sin rather than obedience to God. This attitude was not limited to the kings of Israel and does not indict them exclusively, for they aren't the only ones in this mindset. It seems widespread in people. Notice, if you will, that we say that we love God and we live to do his will, but at every turn notice what goes on. We don't see a lot of it here, but notice what happens in most Bible studies if you go to Bible studies. The first thing that starts happening, did the Bible say that? Are we really supposed to be doing that? Could we maybe just do this? Why can't we just do that? Is it okay to do? The question always seems to be on the back burner, how much sin can I get away with and still make it into the kingdom of God? How much sin can I get away with and not get my tail burnt off? Just watch it. When you go to Bible studies, listen to it. You won't hear somebody say, we should do this. We should do that too. And you know what? Maybe we should do that too just to make sure. You don't hear a lot of that. You used to hear it in the Messianic circles, but it's getting to the point now where it's kind of like them the same thing. Hey, maybe we don't need to do that. Or maybe if we do this, it'll make up for that. Doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that. We say we love God. We say we live to do his will. But we're trying to figure out what that will is. We instead try to see how much can we get away with, and what is that really in the will of God, or is that just your interpretation? That's what you'll hear. This is illogical. It doesn't make sense. Yet, as people, we do it and find no problem with it. Let's go to Romans, the 12th chapter, the first verse. Romans, the 12th chapter, where we are told that our walk as believers is to be considered a living sacrifice. But we don't seem to know what this sacrifice changes us into. You see, once we go down into the waters of baptism and that old man of worldly sin is left there, we're bought with a price. A great price, by the way. That price being the blood and death of Yeshua Messiah. And just as the blood of dead animals and the cessation of their lives only represented their loss in exchange for Old Testament sin, the loss of the life of Christ represents the loss of the Son of God. And you got people that teach that, oh, he didn't really die. He was just down there for 3 days. He went and preached to the angels and angels in hell. Think about the stupidity of that just for a minute, and you'll realize how stupid the whole concept is. This life loss represents the loss for 3 days and 3 nights. Forget that other stuff about, oh, it's just allegory. It's just parts of 3 days and 3 nights. Friday evening to Sunday morning is fine. Yeah, to somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about. I'd leave that alone. But the world loves it because it absolves them of having to do anything. They like that. I don't. And we shouldn't either. But this loss of the Son of God is there in exchange for our sins in life before offering our new lives after we came up out of that watery baptism, which was representing, by the way, the grave of your old man. We come up sinless and clean to the Father. In mercy, God chose to cancel our sin debt by sacrificing his sinless Son in our place. In exchange, we are to offer our lives to him. For without his sacrifice, we would eventually die, lose our chance to live forever with him in his kingdom, and just die. Just go. You just had your little 50, 70, 80 years. You got kids now, get shot at 10 and 11. Thank God for this plan of salvation where they will be risen in flesh and get time to prove that these things are true in a world where they've already been proven, as opposed to this maelstrom of insanity we're in now where we're not even sure what the book says. Because every time you pick it up and read from it, somebody is saying, oh, that doesn't mean that. That's just allegory. Oh, that's just theory. We can't prove that. Or you'll hear the atheists, there is no God. Notice that whenever they're about this close to closing their eyes in death, maybe, just maybe, there might be a God. You go back and read almost any book from an atheist, if they were written just before their deaths, at some point near the end of that book, they start wondering about, maybe there is something there. Something about heading for a brick wall at 100 miles an hour in your last breath. It does make you think just a little bit differently about what's going to happen after you hit the wall. Just is what it is. Romans, the 12th chapter, the first verse. I beseech you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, pleasing to God, which is your minimal service. That's minimum wage. That's the last thing you should expect to do. That's just the minimum, your reasonable service. Verse 2. Verse 2 explains what we are to do with our lives and the direction it is expected to take in gratitude for this gift of Yeshua. Verse 2. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed. Transformed, that means a complete change. If you're going this way, turn a 180 and go back the other way. I heard somebody the other day, it was so funny, it was a sermon, this guy was talking about, you got to make a 360-degree turn. I'm thinking, dude, read it before you speak it. A 360 is you're going right back where you came from. But then sometimes when I look at what goes on out there, I almost wonder, was he speaking what he thought was true? Just wondering. But be transformed by the renewing of your mind in order to prove by you what is that good and pleasing and perfect will of God. You see, in all of this is a phrase in this concept called grace that seems misunderstood by most believers because of the misconstrued concept of mercy that was put into it. It was not the blood of those sacrifices that cleansed sinners. It was the grace of God that forgave those who trusted in him. Yet the churches tell us that once you go in that water and come back, we don't have to do anything else. As they say, Jesus did it all. Wait. Nothing that we can do will save us. So we believe, as most churches errantly tell us now, that since nothing we can do will save us, there's nothing that we need to do to remain in the will of God. Wait a minute. Freeze. This is a lie. Men are now told that they need only mouth the words of the prayer of faith, and they're magically transformed into believers. They don't have to change their lives. They don't have to keep God's commandments. They don't have to do anything else. And we believe this nonsense because we want to live in this world's concepts of freedom. Even in the weak constitution we live under, doesn't it have a set of laws? If you break those laws, what happens to you? And you think God is not going to at least be strong enough to come up with some ironclad, sensible laws that are truly blind? I see our laws, and they're sitting there, they're taking the blindfold and going, hey, we like them. They gave us money. We'll let them off. Yeah, justice is blind when she's paid to be. Don't get me started. But this is nonsense. But we think that it's okay because we think freedom means we don't have to keep any laws. We think it's doing what we want to do. And that's exactly what Satan has told us it is. If you go back and check out the churches of the world, that's what they tell you. You don't have to do anything. It's all done. He did it for you. Just go back to whatever you were doing before. Hang your 360 right back to the bar. Hang your 360 right back to those 3 lines of coke you had over there. You finished, you missed one. And your buddy's going to get it if you don't hurry up. Gone back and party. Some fine girls over there. Some nice young boys over there. I'll keep the pre-on. But what I'm saying is, you reach a point where you want freedom, but you don't realize freedom comes with a price. What is that price? Discipline, according to some rule of law. God told us that we are his, and life is only transformed into a life worthy of him by doing his will. So what is his will? That's the next question you'll hear. What is his will? In seeking a biblical answer, I may have found the reason why the world is so derelict and obstinate in its willingness to give thanks to God on even one day a year. Follow me on this and you'll see the problems and the cause of it. Now, the first warning and instructions came to the Israelites coming out of Egypt. Let's go to Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, the first verse. Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, the first verse, where it says, "And it will be, if you shall listen carefully to the voice of Yahweh, your Elohim, to observe and do all his commandments, which I command you today." Yahweh, your Elohim, will set you on high above all nations of the earth. All he's saying, just do what I told you to do. Do what I asked you to do. Don't, can we kind of skip on that one? Is it okay if we just do this? That fourth one, it's a football game, the playoffs on Saturday. Can we kind of, that's what we do. That's who we are. That's who we are. Deuteronomy, let's go to the 15th verse. But if, there's always an if. If he gives you an order, there's always an if. But if you will not obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, or be careful to do all his commandments and his statutes that I command you today, then all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you. Now, he detailed what would happen to them, but we'll get back to that later because I think it's important, because I think some of it is already happening. We just don't see it or choose not to. But also note that the same instructions were given in the New Testament to followers of Yeshua, for those people who want to believe it when they tell you there is no law or that you don't have to keep it. You see, there's no difference in terms of the commandments from the Old to the New Testament, except that in the New, they are given a spiritual, expansive component that deals with your thoughts just as much as your actions, which keeps them alive spiritually as well as physically after these physical bodies are gone. John, the 15th chapter, the 10th verse. Oh, it's not in the, that's Old Testament stuff. We don't have to read that. Since when did John 15:10 put in for an address change? John, the 15th chapter, the 10th verse, where it says, if you keep my commandments, what? That's New Testament. That's not possible. Oh, but it is. Read it on. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. 1 John, the 3rd chapter, the 22nd verse. 1 John, the 3rd chapter, the 22nd verse, where it says, and whatever we ask, we receive from him because we don't have to do anything. It's all done for us. Oh, never mind. Let's go back and try that again. I must have missed somewhere. And whatever we ask, we receive from him because we keep his commandments and do those things that are pleasing in his sight. And this is his commandment, that we should believe on the name of his son, Yeshua Messiah, and love one another. What? Hey, maybe we find another problem here. All this bigotry and hate we find in the world, not only for the poor, but for anybody that doesn't look like you. Pick your own you. We all have one. And love one another as he gave us commandment. 24. And he who keeps his commandment dwells in him, and he in him. And by this we know that he abides in us, by the Spirit which he gave us, which was there, as Romans 12:1 said, is there to teach us, to transform us. Our minds do not naturally think that we're supposed to love everybody the way we love ourselves. See, that gets into the whole problem of how much do we really love ourselves. That's a whole other conversation in and of itself, and a series of sermons that will come. Interesting stuff. But you have to deal with it. You're dealing with not that person that maybe has been molested or have problems with loving themselves. That's a whole other issue that can be dealt with later. But he said that he loves us because we love each other. The Holy Spirit within us, if we listen to it, will teach us his will also. 1 Thessalonians, the 4th chapter, the 1st verse. 1 Thessalonians, the 4th chapter, the 1st verse, where it says, "Finally, then, brothers, we ask and urge you in the Master Yeshua, that as you received from us how you ought to walk, and to please God just as you were doing, that you do so more and more." In other words, it's not going to come overnight, people. It's going to happen over time. You will learn this through studying, through reading, through dealing with interpersonal situations that might not always be good for you, but it may be profitable in that you learn how to deal with it the next time you encounter it. Verse 2. "For you know what instructions we gave through the Master Yeshua. For this is the will of God, your sanctification." What is sanctification? Sanctification is being set apart to do God's will and keep what? His commandments. "For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality. That each one of you knows how to control his own body in holiness and honor." Knowing how and doing it, that's two different things. 5. "Not in the passion of lust like the Gentiles, but who do not know God, that no one transgress and wrong his brother in this matter." And it doesn't just limit to that. He says not to wrong him in any way when you extend it properly. "Because the Lord is an avenger in all these things, as we told you beforehand and solemnly warned you. For God has not called us for impurity, but in holiness. Therefore, whoever disregards this disregards not man, but God, who gives his Holy Spirit to you." In other words, you have no excuse. You got a teacher right there resident. Verse 9. "Now, concerning brotherly love, you have no need for anyone to write you." This one should have been clear already, which seems to be the one we have the most trouble with in this country. Gee, he's a different color than me, but I tell you what, let's all take a knife and run it across our wrist, not across the vein, and just let the blood drop. Now, mix it all together. Now, whose blood is whose? Without a DNA swab, you'll never know. That's the only way they'll be re-separated. Only way. But we believe, oh no, they're a different color than us, so we have to treat them differently. Oh, we can shoot them on sight, even if they have toy guns, because they're... Now we're beginning to see the problem. Lack of love. Not racism, not bigotry, lack of love. That can happen in families. Ask Abel. But what I'm saying is this. It's not intellectually hard to wrap your mind around. Where the problem comes in is when I want this, but God says that. That's where the problem comes in. Or my folks, the people say that I'm supposed to think this way, but the Bible says that this isn't right. So I have to make my mind up. It should have already been made up for you. But unfortunately, it is what it is. Verse 9 again. "Now concerning brotherly love, you have no need for anyone to write you." In other words, I've made it clear. "For you yourselves have been taught by God to love one another." Now, if there was nothing more for us to do, why are we told that love of God is the keeping of his commandments? and carefully accepting the guidance of the Holy Spirit within us and the love of our brothers as we love ourselves, all of these things seem to be somewhat important to God. We're taught that because these things are here, that this is what makes us better people. But look at the world. We shoot each other for any foolish reason. The police all over the country shoot men, women, children, and their pets down for the slightest little thing. Oh, I thought he had a gun. Oh, he reached for my gun. He reached for my arm. He reached for my arm. He reached in and grabbed my gun, and then he ran. Oh, and then I shot him. Look at the facts in the case. How in the world did he get away and run 150 feet away from the gun, then turn around and shoot? When they shot him, he fell 150 feet away, which means that if he was grabbing for the gun, at some point he snatched his arm away and ran. This was revenge. It wasn't, I was fearing for my life. No, I was fearing for my ego. Be honest about it and quit playing. But we want to believe our policemen, but the fact of the matter is we're supposed to deal with it honestly, and so are they. And so is the DA. And so are the jurors that were placed there in a grand jury. Look at it honestly. But there's a whole town full of one culture, and here's a whole hierarchy that's another, and we've got this little problem that says they don't look like me, they don't think like me, they don't act like me, therefore they can't be treated the same way I am, because that somehow makes me deficient. No, your deficiency is in your inability to deal honestly with all people, whoever we are. That's where the problem is. And that's where the problem lies in this country. And until we resolve that, nothing else is going to be resolved. We've got a whole group of people that think that it's okay for some people to make trillions of dollars illegally, and others, they don't even want to give them, now they're trying to snatch away food stamps. Anything that constitutes a safety net. Oh, no, they don't need that. Make them go to work. Well, that kind of would be okay, except for you offshored most of the jobs. This is the same problem you've been dealing with the whole time. You've got too much of an imbalance of wealth here. If everybody, as we said in the Bible study this morning, if everybody just paid their fair share of taxes to the government instead of to some private bank, you might have enough money to do some things where everyone would have, businesses would be able to open in depressed neighborhoods where everyone could have a job instead of a WIC card or SNAP card or something. And then you wouldn't have a whole other group of people who have a degree and suddenly decide, well, now I'm never going to have to go through that, so we don't care about them anymore. Time out for that. Time out for that. Think of the country as a chain, and think of the poor as the weakest link. When the whole thing breaks, the best thing to do is to try to strengthen all links. That's what makes sense, not what we're doing. Oh, we're better, so let them fall, it's okay. Which falls right into the plans of some people. You've got Ted Turner and some people that are walking around saying, well, it would be cool if you could just get rid of 80 to 85% of the population. You know what that means? You're talking about killing some 6.5 billion people. Now, there's some cool ways to do that. War is one. Unchecked disease is another, and you're starting to see little pieces of that now as these people fight for who's going to get control of this situation. Why would you bring people in with Ebola if you don't have a way to cure it? Just wondering. All of these things do whose work? What does it say? I think it was in Mark. Does it say that his plan is to kill and steal and destroy? So who's the God of this world? So whose work are they doing? So who are they worshiping? Very simple. Very simple stuff. Yet, we feel that we're doing what we want because we're letting them do what they want. So now it's time to deal honestly. Let's go back to Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, the 15th verse, and there's a little bit more information there than maybe we wanted, but I think we need it. Maybe not we sitting here, but maybe the rest of the world needs to understand that there's a punishment for not doing what God told his people to do. But if you will not obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, or be careful to do all his commandments and his statutes that I command you today, then all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you. Everybody strapped in? Let's go. Cursed shall you be in the city, and cursed shall you be in the field. Gangs shoot our children already. 12 years old, had a cap gun, was it? Police shoot our children, and our fields are taken over by genetically modified crops that render our wombs barren and our seed empty. Note the difficulties that even the young have conceiving in this age. Verse 17, cursed shall be your basket and your kneading bowl. Note the problem with bread now. Remember they used to always talk about, oh, well, if you got nothing else to eat, you got bread. Not with the advent of GMO. Who ever heard of gluten? And now you find out that problems with GMO gluten are the total cause for something that I had never heard until the last year or two. Now I know about 4 or 5 people that have celiac disease. Comes from eating gluten with GMO. You've had people stop eating bread and stop eating rices and things of that nature, and the celiac goes away. Just something to think about. Verse 18, cursed shall be the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your ground, an increase of your herds and the young of your flocks. Cursed shall you be when you come in, and cursed shall you be when you go out. Yahweh will send on you curses, confusion, and frustration in all that you undertake. You are destroyed and perish quickly on account of the evil, not of my deeds, your deeds. Because you have forsaken me. That's interesting. But it gets deeper. Yahweh will make the pestilence stick to you until he has consumed you off the land that you are entering to take possession of it. Saw a really great article the other day. He was talking about the Indians and the first pilgrims, and they said, yeah, we decided we were going to feed the aliens rather than send them back. 22. No, nobody got that one, huh? Okay, just think about it. It'll sink in. Yahweh will strike you with wasting disease and with fever, inflammation, and fiery heat, and with drought, and with blight, and with mildew. They shall pursue you until you perish. There are diseases we don't even know where they come from. And people are just dying. And the heavens over your head shall be bronze. Close. When they're shooting and they're lining the clouds with mercury, and it sends most of your sunlight back at the sun, because they say that this is how they're going to keep the bad rays from coming down upon us, and this is how they're going to control the weather. Since our global warming is so bad now, we have to reduce the sun's effects on us. Nonsense. More nonsense. Won't name any names, but a dummy said it, and a lot of other ones heard it and believed it. 24, Yahweh will make the rain of your land powder. And you've actually seen the stuff come down as powder in places like Australia, where people looked out and saw white powder in their fields in the middle of July and didn't know why or where it came from. And don't think because they've destroyed the HARP towers that there's no more radiation being shot up there. Believe me, they can do it from satellites now. That's why they're dismantling it, because it was $800 million a year that they didn't want to spend anymore. They could spend it on other things, other weapon systems. Oh, shut up, Ray, you're getting yourself in too deep. Verse 25, Yahweh will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You shall go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them. And you shall be a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth, and your dead body shall be food for all the birds of the air and for the beasts of the earth, and there shall be no one to frighten them away. How many of you have fed birds in the last year or two? How many of you noticed that they don't seem to have a great deal of fear of mankind anymore? Well, I can tell you, we got deer out our way. They're not afraid of you anymore. They will stand their ground until the last minute and kick and try to kick straight for your head. I'm serious. 27. Yahweh will strike you with the boils of Egypt and with tumors and scabs and itch of which you cannot be healed. Yahweh will strike you with madness and blindness and confusion of mind. And you shall grope at noonday as the blind grope in darkness, and you shall not prosper in your ways, and you shall be only oppressed and robbed continually, and there shall be no one to help you. Remember all that a few years back? They said, oh, that was over with the whole banking industry and all that fraud. Sound familiar? He's telling you what's happening, and we like, oh, that's just the Old Testament. That don't mean anything to us. Oh, it doesn't. Verse 30. You shall betroth a wife, but another man shall ravish her. Sound like swapping to me. Oh. You shall build a house, but you shall not dwell in it. You shall plant a vineyard, but you shall not enjoy its fruit. Your ox shall be slaughtered before your eyes, but you shall not eat any of it. Your donkey shall be seized before your face, but shall not be restored to you. Anybody see that old movie Repo Man? There are no horses now, but it's the same thing. Your sheep shall be given to your enemies, but there shall be no one to help you. Your sons and your daughters shall be given to another people. You were already seeing now what they call white slavery. I guess that made it more important, I guess. I don't know. But what they're saying is, but what was happening, they would have ads in the paper. You go out and say you got a job. Oh, we're going to fly you over to this country. And you get over there and you're not getting paid. You're a slave. Depending on what kind of place you went to, either you're a slave for some rich person or you're in sexual slavery. It's happening already. 33. A nation that you have not known shall eat up the fruit of your ground and of all your labors, and you shall be only oppressed and crushed continually, so that you are driven mad by the sights that your eyes see. Yahweh will strike you on the knees and on the legs with grievous boils of which you cannot be healed, from the sole of your foot to the crown of your head. You see in these pictures now with these people with these growths all over their necks and just stuff that you never saw before. Unbelievable stuff. It's already happening. But they just, oh yeah, we're the medical community. We'll figure it out. Haven't yet. Yahweh will bring you and your king whom you set over you to a nation that neither you nor your fathers have known. And there you shall serve other gods of wood and stone. This is a prophecy for the future enfolded here. Yes, it did happen it had already happened with Egypt there. And it happened several other times with Israel. But we are all his people now, whether we want to recognize it or not. Therefore, these things are happening as we go forward. This thing goes up to 60. I could go through the whole thing, but I think we get the point. We have a problem here. The problem is we do not believe in God. Therefore, we feel that there is no need to obey him. Yet, now this is the problem. It wouldn't be a problem so much if we didn't claim we were God's country. If you're going to say you're God's country and do dirt, as far as he's concerned, you're doing that dirt in his name. If you're going to do that dirt in his name, guess what's going to happen to you? We have yet to see it, but the Bible is very clear on it. We're all going to pay. And I think the only reason that we haven't paid more already is because there are more of us praying than will admit it. I believe that there are more people praying than there are people who want to continue to do this dirt. Some might still be on the fence and not quite sure, but I believe the imbalance is on God's side right now, because if it wasn't, things would be worse than they are. But my fear is that as we continue to listen to these, I want to say TV preachers, but they're on the internet too, and they're everywhere else. They're lying. They're telling people, all you have to do is say these words and you're a Christian, and you're a believer, and God will save you. And no, he's already said, if you're not doing my will, or at least trying to do my will, and pray to me, I will not hear you. So I can only say we should pray louder and work harder to do what he said do. And when he gives us anything, forget about waiting for the 4th week in November. Praise whenever it happens. Thanksgiving Day is the day you realize that you got something that you couldn't have done for yourself. Whatever day that is, that's when you say, thank God. And you think your Thanksgiving is every day that happens. Mine is today. God bless you all.